أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. Verse number 31. اتخذوا أحبارهم ورهبانهم أربابا من دون الله والمسيح ابن مريم وما أمروا إلا ليعبدوا إلها واحدا لا إله إلا هو سبحانه عما يشركون. They have taken their scribes and their monks as lords beside Allah, and also Christ, Mary's son, though they were commanded to worship only the one God. There is no God except Him. He is far too immaculate to have any partners that they ascribe to Him. We discussed this verse to some extent in our previous session. Only I wanted to mention a few riwayat about this verse which I alluded to in the previous session, and also there's a discussion about our own situation in the Islamic Ummah with regards to this verse. Now it says that they have taken their scribes and their monks as lords besides Allah, and also Christ, Mary's son. Now, since it has separated between the monks and the scribes on the one hand and Jesus Christ on the other, it means that there is two different types of taking them as lords. And we know they have taken Jesus Christ as Lord in the sense that they regard Him as Son of God or God Himself. However, and they worship Jesus Christ in a sense. However, they do not worship their scribes and their monks. So the way they have taken them as their lords besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is different from the way they have taken Jesus Christ. Now, certainly we know that the Jews and Christians, they do not worship the monks and the scribes. And this is a question which came to the mind of many people the time the verse was revealed, that what does the verse mean? Why it says that the Jews and Christians have taken them as their lords, why they do not worship them. I mentioned that there is hadith from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq about this, alayhi salam, and I was just going through other riwayat, and I saw that the riwayat, the traditions come both from Shia and Sunni side, both from the Prophet and from A'imma, to the same effect. Now, I mentioned two traditions here, and then a discussion which follows it. Now, one tradition from Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam and from Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam, أنهما قالا أما والله ما صاموا ولا صلوا لهم. By God, they did not fast or they did not pray for them, so before them. And when we say that they have taken them as laws, it is not in this sense. ولكنهم أحلوا لهم حراما وحرموا عليهم حلالا. But they allowed them to do things which were haram, and they prohibited for them things which were halal. فَاتَّبَعُوهُمْ, and they followed them. وَعَبَدُوهُمْ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ, and they worshipped them in a way that they themselves didn't understand it. So it means that although they didn't know that they are worshipping these people, they didn't know that this is a worship, but in the eyes of Allah this is regarded as a worship. If you follow someone as an authority in religion, which of course they don't have. Now, we of course follow the Prophet, peace be on him, as an authority in religion, but this is an authority given to him by God, and anyone else that we want to follow as an authority, we should have a proof for it. There is another hadith. This is from Sunni chain of transmission. This is in Tafseer of Tha'labi, which is a Sunni exegete, from Adi ibn Hatam. Adi ibn Hatam was son of Hatam al-Ta'i, and he was a mushrik, then he became a Christian, And of course he fought the Prophet, and there's a long story before he became a Muslim. Now he came to the Prophet, and Prophet was reciting this verse: اتخذوا أحبارهم ورهبانهم أربابا من دون الله. They took their scribes and their monks as lords beside Allah. Adi ibn Hatim says, فَقُلْتُ لَهُ, if he was a Christian at that time, إِنَّا لَسْنَا نَعْبُدُهُم, we do not worship our scribes or our monks. What do you say? This is not something that could be ascribed to us. فَقَالَ, the Prophet said, أَلَيْسَ يُحَرِّمُونَ مَا أَحَلَّ اللَّهُ فَتُحَرِّمُونَ وَيُحِلُّونَ مَا حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ فَتَسْتَحِلُّونَ. Are they not forbidding you things which Allah has allowed you to do? Or are they not allowing things for you to be done which Allah has forbidden, and you allow it? He said, yes. قَالَ فَتِلْكَ عِبَادَتُهُمْ. He said, well, this is the worship. This is what we call as worship. Now we have in another hadith that from Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam, Man asgha ila natiqin faqad abadah. Whoever listens to someone, listens in the sense of following and obeying someone, he has actually worshipped that person. Now we are getting a more expanded sense of worship here. It's not just praying or fasting or something like that, as Imam Baqir alayhi salam mentions. It is something more expanded, vaster meaning than that, which is mentioned in this hadith of Amirul Mu'mineen, that whoever listens to someone, it is as if they have worshipped them. فَإِنْ كَانَ النَّاطِقُ مِنَ اللَّهِ فَقَدْ عَبَدَ اللَّهِ. If that speaker speaks from God or from the Prophet, so to speak, on behalf of them or conveying their message, then that person has worshipped God. وَأَنْ كَانَ النَّاطِقُ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ فَقَدْ أَبَدَ الشَّيْطَانِ. And if the speaker is from the shaitan, then they have worshipped the shaitan. And if you remember, when we were discussing this verse in Surah Yasin, أَلَمْ أَعْهَدْ إِلَيْكُمْ يَا بَنِي آدَمَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا الشَّيْطَانَ إِنَّهُ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ مُبِينٌ وَأَنِ اعْبُدُونِي هَذَا صِرَاطٌ مُسْتَقِيمٌ. Did I not take your pledge, O you children of Adam, that you should not worship shaitan, because he is a great enemy, a clear enemy to you, and you should worship me. Now, we mentioned that usually people do not worship shaitan. We don't have anyone in this world worshipping shaitan. Of course, we have some people who are called the worshippers of shaitan. Especially in Iran, we have a group of them in Western Iran. We call them shaitan parast, the worshippers of shaitan. However, they are a mystical circle of Darawish, which have some ideas from people like Ahmad Ghazali and others, distorted of course ideas, that they say, well, shaitan, since he did not prostrate for Adam, so he was the real monotheist in this world, because all other angels, they worshipped for Adam, they prostrated for Adam, except shaitan. His zeal for Allah did not let him to do that. And although Allah told him that I will punish you with the hellfire, he said, yes, okay, I accept that, but I do not prostrate for anyone besides you. Okay, they make these type of interpretations for themselves, and they are called worshippers of shaitan, but they are real a minority group in this world. We don't have anyone worshipping shaitan really. But in the Quran we are told that most of the people are worshipping shaitan. So what's the meaning of this? Now we could actually, with this expanded type of more general meaning of worship, we could say those who obey shaitan, obey those who talk from shaitan or on behalf of shaitan, then they have worshipped shaitan. So this verse would be given a new light if we put it in the context of these traditions which have come from the Prophet, peace be on him, and from A'imma alayhimus salam. Now, what is our situation in our own ummah? Do we not worship in this sense, our ulama, or in the first place, our a'imma, we Shias, because we follow our a'imma, alayhimus salam. Whatever they make halal for us, we say it's halal. Whatever they make haram for us, we say it's haram. So are we not worshipping them even in this sense? Well, the a'imma, alayhimus salam, especially in this case, the question had put to Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salam, is this not what we are doing as well? Now, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam explained that no, of course, whatever A'imma say, they say it on the authority of the Prophet, peace be on him. They never say anything from themselves. We Shias, we do not believe that A'imma are allowed, or they would ever do such a thing, to make something halal which has not been there in the Sharia of the Prophet, or to make something haram which has not been there in the Sharia of the Prophet. Now, there are some instances which the injunctions mentioned by A'imma alayhimus salam could not be found in the Sunni traditions coming from the Prophet, peace be on him. And this has posed the question, okay, is this not what A'imma alayhimus salam have made halal or haram themselves? Now, what our ulama explain, according to some other riwayat from A'imma alayhimus salam, is that, well, not whatever Prophet made halal or haram has reached us. What the duty of A'imma alayhimus salam was actually to explain and to clarify things which were not probably expounded and explained at the time of the Prophet, because the need did not arise, because no one questioned the Prophet, because the case was not there, or even because it was mentioned but it was lost. It was somehow not reached the later generations. So the A'imma alayhimus salam, they insisted, and very emphatically, that whatever we say, it is only an explanation of the Sharia of the Prophet. We do not make anything halal ourselves, or we do not make anything haram ourselves. So this was quite clear. For Shias at the beginning, it was quite clear that A'imma did not have that authority to make anything halal or haram on their own accord and on their own behalf. It was only the explanation, clarification of the Sharia of the Prophet, peace be on him. Now, our ulama today, of course, we call them mujtahidun. It means they exert their full efforts to find out what was the Sharia of the Prophet. And when they issue a fatwa, of course, they issue a fatwa in the sense that they say, to the best of our knowledge, this is the meaning of the fatwa, to the best of our knowledge and our conjecture, this is what the Prophet had ordered us to do or not to do. This is the meaning of ijtihad. And if they vary in their fatwa, in issuing different, in their opinions, it is because, of course, they understand the literature and they understand the sources available to them in a different way. This is the only reason why they differ, they vary with each other in their fatwa. And therefore, no one could mention that the ulama, the Shia ulama, have actually made haram something which was not halal, which was halal at the time of the Prophet, or vice versa. Now, in the Sunni world as well, we have the same thing. The ijtihad that we had in the Sunni world, and now, of course, the people are following those mujtahidun, which were absolute mujtahids, the four imams at the beginning of formation of Islamic jurisprudence. They follow them in the sense that, to the best of their knowledge, they had the best knowledge about the Sharia of the Prophet. Now, one might say that the use of qiyas or analogy is something which might bring into mind that this is also making haram something which was halal in the Sharia by a conjecture which is a very bold conjecture. Now, when we say in Shi'i fiqh, in Shi'i jurisprudence, the ulama make conjectures about Sharia. Now, we have a valid conjecture and we have an invalid conjecture. Of course, conjecture in the sense that, for example, I say, well, in my opinion, it should be like this. Well, this conjecture is invalid conjecture. What is my opinion to be regarded as valid in this, in the case of Sharia? When we say the ulama make conjecture, it means that they go through the Quran, they go through all the riwayat, they go through all the sources, they go through all the principles, and at the end they say, when we put all these together, we conjecture. Well, this is a valid conjecture, of course. We conjecture that this is the ruling of Sharia, this is the ruling of the Prophet. This is a valid conjecture. Now, using qiyas, we know that our Aimma alayhimus salam, they very emphatically and explicitly, they condemn the use of qiyas or analogy in finding the ruling of the Sharia. Why? Because, of course, they said this is not a valid type of conjecture to find the ruling of the Sharia. And we might say that, okay, analogy is like this. You say, in such a situation, there was such a ruling by the Prophet. Now we are in a situation which we feel is similar to that situation. And we feel that the ruling should be something similar to that ruling. Now there are too many complicated conjectures going on here. And of course, it makes it something which is not quite reliable to rely on when we want to issue a fatwa about a case of Sharia of the Prophet, peace be on him. And we might say, okay, if we obey someone who uses qiyas or analogy in the Sharia, we have actually fallen in this category of اتخذوا أحبارهم ورهبانهم أربابا من دون الله. They are worshipping their scribes or their scholars, their ulama. We are worshipping our ulama as well. However, of course, this is not the case, because the Muslim scholars who use qiyas, they regard it as a valid conjecture which could lead them to the best of their knowledge to what the Prophet, peace be on him, might have issued as a religious injunction. And they never say that this is what we rule. They never say this is what we make haram or we make halal. They say, due to this analogy, we feel that this is what the Prophet would have actually told us if he was, for example, alive and with us in this situation. So even the use of analogy, I don't think, would make the Muslim ulama to fall in this category that they are like ahbar and ruhban and the Muslims are worshipping them. Now there's only one issue remaining here, and that is the case with one companion of the Prophet who was very bold in issuing his own opinions as religious opinions. And this is, of course, you know, the second Caliph, Umar ibn al-Khattab. Now, he issued orders and made injunctions which were completely against the rulings of the Prophet. And he did not say this is because of an analogy or this is because I feel that the Prophet wanted it. He just mentioned that this is what Prophet issued as an injunction, and that was his order, and this is my order, and this is my injunction, and I have such an authority. In fact, as a caliph, he didn't limit the authority of the caliph only into political issues or into the administration of the society. But he saw the authority to be vaster, to be not limited only to that, but he could issue injunctions about Sharia and matters of religion. Well, it is very famous from him. Salatul Tarawih is something that he actually issued a fatwa or an injunction, not fatwa even, an injunction about it. And of course, it was not something which was done at the time of the Prophet, peace be on him. And also about the two mut'as, which is very, very famous from him. One is mut'atun nisa, that he forbade it. He said that this is not something which would go with a religious mind. This is like zina, and whoever commits it is like a fornicator or an adulterer. It was allowed at the time of the Prophet, and I prohibit. And the other was mut'atul hajj. That's hajj tamattu, of course, because hajj tamattu is when you go for Hajj, first of all, you make ihram for Umrah, and then after you finish your Umrah, you come out of your ihram. In fact, you can have tamattu, in the sense that you can enjoy things which were not allowed in ihram until the day of Hajj, of course. Which then you again make your ihram, and all those things would become forbidden for you again. Now, this tamattu between Umrah and Hajj, this enjoying, having the enjoyment from different issues which are haram at the time of ihram, this was something that Umar ibn al-Khattab, of course, did not like, because he thought that this doesn't go with the spirit of Hajj. The spirit of Hajj is that so long as you are in the Hajj, you have to be in ihram, you have to not enjoy those things which are forbidden in ihram. And especially, he said, I cannot allow a person coming from his bed, from his wife, straight away to Kaaba making tawaf, because at that time of tamattu, of course, the things, all these sexual issues are allowed as well. And he said, how can I allow this, that a person comes from besides his wife and make tawaf in the Kaaba? This is not, this doesn't go very well with the spirit of Hajj. So he made it haram. Now, does it fall in this category? اتخذوا أحبارهم. I mean, if we follow Umar ibn al-Khattab in this, we know that our Sunni brothers follow Umar ibn al-Khattab. Of course, not all of them, most of them. They follow Umar ibn al-Khattab in this issue, which, especially Salatul Taraweeh, they follow Mut'atul Hajj and Mut'atul Nisa. Most of them they follow. They do not allow it. Now, I don't know whether it does fall in this category of اتخذوا أحبارهم ورهبانهم أربابا من دون الله, because all the ahadith that we have in this issue is that if they make haram or halal something which was on the opposite side at the time of their prophet or in their sharia, they make halal something which was haram, and they make haram something which was halal, and they are equally important. Sometimes we feel that if we make things which are halal, if we make them haram, they are not as dangerous as making halal haram, making the haram halal. For example, we say that, okay, fornication is haram. Now, if we make fornication halal by some sort of explanation or interpretation, this is very dangerous. However, if something is halal and we make it haram, we don't see that type of danger in it. We say, okay, this makes us more austere, this makes us more religious, more pious, and it's good, it's kosher, something which we doubt whether it's halal or haram, we make it haram for ourselves. Well, this is as dangerous as the previous one. We know that in Christianity, why people have run away from Christianity, why people have actually left religion in the West, is to very great extent due to many things which were halal at the time of Jesus Christ and at the time of Musa, and they made it haram. Divorce. I mean, you cannot imagine in a society which people naturally they fall out, the couples fall out, they have divorce, and you do not allow them to marry after divorce. Well, what type of society you are going to have? And how are you going to pull the people towards the religion after they have done divorce? They either have to commit adultery or fornication, or they have to stay without marriage until the end of their lives. So this is something which is very dangerous, of course. Although all of us know that divorce is a very hated thing, is very bad, is something which no one should do in their lives. But we have to allow some space for those circumstances in which divorce happens and people want to marry again. Now, if the church does not ordain, does not accept a second marriage after divorce, then what the people are going to do? They have to leave the religion. That's as easy as that. Now, if we have things which are halal in religion and we make them haram, to say because this is more cautious, because this is more holy or more religiously spirited, then we have made something which of course does not go with this verse and eventually the outcome of it would be that people would go out of religion. I don't know how we have to solve this issue of the injunctions of the second caliph with this verse. The only explanation might be that the second caliph understood something from the injunctions of the Prophet that other companions did not understand. In fact, because he was the only person who understood this from the injunctions of the Prophet. That Prophet, although he allowed, for example, mut'atul hajj or mut'atul nisa, but he was reluctant of it. He didn't dare, for example, to tell people that you shouldn't do this. The time was not right for telling that to the people. And Umar ibn Khattab later on found that, well, since the Prophet was reluctant of it, he did not dare to mention it to the people, or probably Allah wanted him to mention it, but he did not. So he started to mention this to the people, and they followed him. This is the only way that we can somehow exclude that case from this verse. Otherwise, I think it would fall in the verse اتخذوا أحبارهم ورهبانهم أربابا من دون الله. So this is in this regard, and all of course, while Masih ibn Maryam, the way they have taken Masih ibn Maryam as Lord is different from the way they have taken the Ahbar and the Ruhban as Lords. That's why they have been mentioned separately. While, of course, what we had ordered them was different. وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا إِلَهًا وَاحِدًا. Though they were commanded to worship only the one God. لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُ. There is no God except Him. Subhanahu, He is far too immaculate. أَمَّا يُشْرِكُونَ, to have any partners that they ascribe. Now, of course, here you see that the Ahlul Kitab are regarded as mushrikun. And because it says he is too far too immaculate to have any partner, amma yushrikun, as they describe to him. However, here this shirk which we discussed previously doesn't put them in the category of mushrikun, which are mentioned about the idolaters. These are two different type of shirks. Although the very essence of both would be the same. Allah having sons, having children, or obeying people in the matter of religion without authority. You see, they are equally the same shirk. It's mentioned here. You see, for the Jews, of course, they took their ahbar as arbab, they followed them, they obeyed them in matters of religion without authority. For Christians, they took Masih as the Lord. And at the end, it is said equally about both of them that they are mushrik. So these are two different types of shirk, of course. Although the essence of it is very similar to the essence of the shirk by idolaters, as we had in a previous verse, which says يُضَاهِئُونَ قَوْلَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنْ قَبْلِ. What they say is similar to what the kuffar before them had said. However, of course, we don't regard them as mushrikun in the sense that we regard idolaters as mushriks. Why? Because they had a book. Because there was a mixture of shirk and tawheed in their religion. They had a book, they had authority. Many of the injunctions there, many of what they do is actually ascribed to that authority of the book. And of course, some of them is different from that authority. So, although we regard them as mushrik, but the rules of mushrikun does not include them, mushrikun, as idolaters. And we know that for idolaters, here in Surah Bara'ah, it was said you have to fight them, no jizya, nothing. They either have to become Muslim or you fight them. While with regards to Ahlul Kitab, it was said you fight them. If they do not become Muslim, they pay jizya, they pay a tax, and then they follow their own religion. This is because of the authority of the book, because that light, that book is still with them. Now, verse number 32, يُرِيدُونَ أَن يُطْفِئُوا نُورَ اللَّهِ بِأَفْوَاهِهِمْ. They desire to put out the light of Allah with their mouths. وَيَعْبَى اللَّهُ إِلَّا أَن يُتِمَّ نُورَهُ وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْكَافِرُونَ. But Allah is intent on perfecting His light, though the faithless should be averse. Now, this is of course a ridicule which Allah is making of them. They want to put out the light of God with their mouths. Now, of course, you can put out a candle with your mouth just by blowing into it, but you never can put out this projector, this light with your mouth. And if you do it, if you go and just blow to it to try to put it out, people would laugh at you. They say this is not possible. This light comes from something else. You cannot. Or if there is a very, very great fire, not even electricity, if there is a very great fire, for example, if a house is on fire and you go and blow with your mouth with the intention to put it out, people would laugh at you. Now, here Allah is saying that this light coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so great, is so magnificent, and anyone who wants to put it out with their mouth just by blowing at it, they are just silly and they cannot do that. So here, of course, the Ahlul Kitab especially, they brought some arguments against the Prophet and against this light, and they wanted to somehow resist and oppose this guidance with their arguments. And Allah says, your arguments are just like blowing into a big fire. This is a very big, magnificent fire. This is like a sun coming. You cannot put it out just with the blowing of your mouth. You cannot resist this guidance just with your arguments. This is going to somehow spread. And of course, we see that it has done. And it has been spread. And no argument of Ahlul Kitab has been able to somehow put out this light coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is a very, very nice statement. يُرِيدُونَ أَن يُطْفِئُوا نُورَ اللَّهِ بِأَفْوَاهِهِمْ. They desire to put out the light of Allah with their mouths. It's a type of ridicule that Allah is making of them. And of course Allah is intent, you cannot resist it, because this is something which Allah has decreed already, that this light should be complete, should be perfected. And the meaning of the perfection of this light comes in the second verse, which we will discuss. وَيَعْبَى اللَّهُ إِلَّا أَن يُتِمَّ نُورَهُ وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْكَافِرُونَ. Though the faithless should be averse, though they would not like it, they would resist it, they want to fight against it, Allah is going to complete and perfect this light. Now, the perfection of this light is explained in the next verse. هُوَ الَّذِي أَرْسَلَ رَسُولَهُ بِالْهُدَى وَدِينِ الْحَقِّ لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْمُشْرِكُونَ. It is He who has sent His apostle with the guidance and the religion of truth, that He may make it prevail over all religions, though the polytheists should be averse. Now, the completion of this light, that Allah says Allah is intent to complete and make this light perfect. In fact, means as we are being explained in this verse, it means that Allah wants it to prevail over all other religions. It is going to destroy whatever comes against it. All arguments are going to be destroyed, and anyone who is going to resist this by any other religion, they are going to be destroyed, and those arguments and religions are going to be destroyed. So this would prevail. Now, of course, there is a problem here, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this verse that He has sent His apostle with guidance and with the true religion of truth, Deen al-Haq, so that He make it prevail over all religions. And we know that this has not happened. Now, usually the expectation of the people at the time of the Prophet, or somehow just immediately after his demise, was that this religion is going to overtake and is going to be victorious over all other religions, and it would become a global religion, and there would be no religion after our Prophet comes. Now, of course, the Muslims at the beginning, who were fighting against other nations and tried to spread Islam, they were of the opinion that this religion is going to be a global religion, and we have the duty to spread it. And so they waged jihad against all other nations, and they expanded very, very quickly. In a very short time, you see that they went really out of the boundaries, and they conquered Africa, Asia, Europe, all places they went very quickly. But it was stopped at some point, and then the whole process slowed down, and gradually it became a reverse process. You will see that Muslims lost Spain after a while, after a few centuries. It became actually a reverse process. And this verse, لَيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ, so that he makes it prevail over all religions. It did not happen. Now, what would be the explanation of this? Now, some exegetes say that it doesn't mean that all other religions would vanish. However, it means that the hujjah, the proof, the argument of this religion is going to be above all other arguments. No other religion can put an argument which would be stronger than the argument of Muslimun. And they would, if a knowledgeable Muslim starts to argue or make a discussion with a scholar of any other religion, it is impossible for them to be able to somehow defeat the Muslim scholar, because the argument of Islam prevails over all other the argument of all other religions. So this is the meaning of لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ, that he may make it prevail over all religions. However, this is not something which usually people, especially at the beginning of Islam, they understood from this verse, and not something that we understand from the verse. We understand that this is going to overcome all other religions, and Islam is going to be global. This is why, of course, we have numerous traditions that this verse has not materialized, has not realized yet. It is going to be realized. It is something which the ta'wil of which has not come yet. We have in a hadith from Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, قال Abu Ja'far alayhi salam, إن ذلك يكون عند خروج المهدي من آل محمد صلى الله عليه وآله. That this is going to happen at the time of the appearance of Mahdi عليه السلام. فلا يبقى أحد إلا أقر بمحمد صلى الله عليه وآله. And no one remains at that time unless they confess to the truthfulness of the Prophet of Islam, of Muhammad, peace be on him. So in fact, what we understand from the verse is understood by others and is explained by Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. Now, among the Sunni exegetes, we have Kalbi and many others who have said the same thing, but with different expressions. He says that سَيَكُونُ ذَلِكَ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ بَعْدُ. This has not happened yet, and it will happen. That Islam would prevail, would become a global religion. وَلَا تَقُومُ السَّاعَةُ حَتَّى يَكُونُ ذَلِكَ. And the resurrection day would not come before this would happen, because this is a promise mentioned in the Quran. And from Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam, we have this hadith about this verse, وَمَا نَزَلَ تَعْوِيلُهَا بَعْدْ. The ta'wil of this verse. Ta'wil here means realization, of course. It's different from interpretation. Ta'wil in the Quran also is used usually in this sense, realization. About all the ayat of the Qiyamah, for example, it mentions in one verse, وَلَمَّا يَأْتِهِمْ تَعْوِيلُهُ. The ta'wil of these verses have not come yet to them, it means they have not realized yet for them. There will come a day in which all these verses would come to realization. So it says that Imam Ja'far Sadiq says, وَمَا نَزَلَ تَعْوِيلُهَا بَعْدُ. The realization of this verse has not yet happened. وَلَا يَنزِلُ تَعْوِيلُهَا حَتَّى يَخْرُجَ الْقَائِمُ. And the realization would not happen until the Qa'im comes. And this is why you would see that in Shi'i tradition, this verse and many other similar verses, we have one verse as well in Surah Saf about this, and in other surahs we have this verse, or this string of verses have been taken as a strong proof for the appearance of Mahdi alayhi salam, and these are one of the verses which are used as an argument for the coming of Mahdi alayhi salam. Now, from the Prophet, this again from Sunni tradition, we have قال المقداد بن الأسود. Of course, Miqdad was a companion of the Prophet. سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله لا يبقى على ظهر الأرض بيت مدر ولا وبر. There wouldn't remain on the earth a tent or a house. Baytu Madaran, Madar is a house made by mud and bricks, and Wabar is a house made by cow skin or goat skin or whatever. So it means no tent and no house would remain on the earth إِلَّا أَدْخَلَهُ اللَّهُ كَلِمَةَ الْإِسْلَامِ, unless Allah would make the word of Islam enter that tent or that house. It means the people of those tents and houses would become Muslims. إِمَّا بِعَزَّ عَزِيزٍ وَإِمَّا بِذُلِّ ذَلِيلٍ. Either by honoring an honorable house. If a house accepts Islam willingly, it is honored, and they are honorable. وَإِمَّا بِذُلِّ ذَلِيلٍ. Or by humiliating a humiliated house or people of a house. If people do not accept Islam and they accept it reluctantly by force, then they are humiliated, and they are humiliated in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so they are dhalil themselves. So he says Islam would enter every house إما بعز عزيزا وإما بذل ذليل إما يعزهم فيجعلهم الله من أهله. So Allah would either dignify them and they would become real Muslims, وَإِمَّا بِذُلِّهِمْ فَيَدِينُونَ اللَّهِ, or they are humiliated and they submit to it by force. So we know that this has not yet happened, and if we take the verse to mean not prevailing by forceful argument, as some exegetes have mentioned, it would be something which should be realized later on, inshallah, and as we have in our ahadith, this would be realized when Imam al-As, al-Qa'im alayhi salam, would come. Okay, the next verse, of course, is something related to this, however, in a different vein. Inshallah, we'll discuss it next week. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa alihi at-tahirin.
Thank you very much. The last comment about these. Okay, we Shias believe that Islam will spread on the appearance of Imam Zaman alayhi salam, but then the other Muslims might have interpreted this differently. I think during the course of your lecture you said that Muslims actually tried to conquer other countries to spread Islam, so this was perhaps interpreted in that way, that it probably is the duty of the Muslim to go and conquer other countries and other people to spread Islam. This is probably may have been.
Yeah, of course, according to Shia faith, this is not a duty until the Qa'im comes. Yeah.
Okay, brothers. Yeah. So, yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. You know, on the last point that you just made, today we see, you talked about the force of the argument, saying that one of the interpretations could possibly be that the argument would prevail, though that is not, that is one interpretation. Could we not sort of look at it today and say that at least as far as the contemporary situation is concerned, even though people don't accept Islam, by the fact the situation the world is today, that it is known, i.e. people are aware and possibly we could say possibly that everybody all over the world, by the fact that the situation and the way the technology is and how the situation in the world is, that at least as far as Islam as a religion is concerned, there is information that there is such an entity. I don't know if you have any comments on that.
That everyone is aware of the forcefulness of the argument of Muslims. Well, it's difficult.
Or at least that they are aware that there is a great religion, whether they accept it or not. I mean, they might even oppose it actively. We see that happening, but it is there. It is something as a force to be reckoned with. That there is and there's a great numbers of people. I don't know, whatever, however, 1/6 or one, however you interpret it, are Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
But not only that, it's just that it is that there are places today that are aware of the fact that the Islam exists that they were not aware, say, 20 or 40 years ago.
Yeah, but it's difficult to say that this is the meaning of to make this religion prevail over all other religions. All the religions. لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ. It is, of course, a fact, as you say, that everyone is now feeling the forcefulness of Muslims and the forcefulness of their attitude. However, that they accept that this is something which is more forceful than their own arguments or than their own religion. This is something which we have to qualify somehow. And well, many people, they oppose Islam just because they do not know what is the argument of Islam. And the best thing that we can do at this time, which we are not allowed to go and call people to Islam by sword, is to make the argument of Islam clear to others so that they understand it. And if they understand it, certainly our argument is over all other arguments. وَأَنْتُمُ الْأَعْلَوْنَ إِن كُنْتُمْ مُؤْمِنِينَ. If you are true believers, then always your argument is going to be above all other arguments. Yeah.
Sisters? Yeah, can you pass the mic
here?
I'm wondering whether, when we were discussing about the difference that is supposed to have been made between the Christian notion of polytheism and the pagan notion of polytheism. At the time of the Holy Prophet, this distinction was probably more clear than it is today, because isn't it true that at that time there were monotheistic Christians and there aren't any left in the world now? So therefore, they were given the respect that they deserved, which they have actually lost, because with the spread of the idea of Trinity, all the monotheistic Christians in Africa and in Europe have now been totally wiped off.
Yeah, it is the case that the more the Christianity has advanced through the history, the more it has lost that monotheistic aspect, and it has come to a sort of Trinitarian zeal. However, there were Trinitarians at the time of the Prophet as well, as it is mentioned in the Quran. وَلَا تَقُولُوا ثَلَاثَةٌ انْتَهُوا. Do not say there are three gods. Stop saying these things. So there were people at that time, and there were other people who identified Jesus Christ with God himself. They didn't say he is Son of God. They said he is the God incarnated in human being, as we have some Christians saying the same thing nowadays. However, Prophet regarded all of them to be Christians and regarded all of them to be Ahlul Kitab, and actually accepted jizya, the poll tax, from all of them. So, although monotheism is actually wiped out in Christianity, however, Prophet treated the same Christians, the same Christians who have the same ideas at this time, treated them as Ahlul Kitab at that time as well. However, nowadays there are there are Christian theologians. It is interesting, in the world of Christianity, theologians are coming more and more coming closer and closer to the monotheism by making the Trinity a symbolical type of language. Last week we had a discussion with Reverend Professor John Macquarie, who is named as the greatest living theologian of the Anglican Church. And it's interesting, he was conceding that all these concepts and language used about Jesus Christ being Son of God and Holy Spirit, and all these are actually symbolic, and we have only one God. And when we say, and it was very interesting, because when I mentioned to him that what you say is very, very close to what Ibn al-Arabi was saying about the creation and all other things, he was first of all amazed. And the second thing I understood was that he did not know anything at all about Islam. And he said that yes, we have studied Islam, and he has written a book about Muhammad, peace be on him, as well, the mediators from Moses to Muhammad. However, his knowledge of Islam was limited to the books of Professor Robson, who is now criticized by everyone about his bigoted, prejudiced views about Islam and distorted views that he had about Islam in the past 50, 60 years ago. And he was amazed hearing that there are such views in Islam as well. And he said that the type of symbolism that we use that I use, of course, he's actually dubbed as a dangerous theologian in Christianity because of these ideas. He said that when I say God, it means God in his absolute existence before creation. When I say Jesus Christ is Son of God, I mean that God now comes out of his absoluteness and creates. And when we say he sends his Son, it means that he comes into the created type of aspect of him, creation aspect of him. He creates, he spreads. And when I say Holy Spirit, I mean that he would somehow take all these back to himself again. And this is the work of Holy Spirit, to take back the whole creation to God. Christ is bringing the creation to this world. This is the mercy of God. And then Holy Spirit is what takes the world back to God. Well, I said, you are actually talking like Ibn al-Arabi, because he says we have one absolute God, of course. And then when he creates, he comes out of that absoluteness with his asma and sifat. And he was saying something almost similar about Jesus Christ. He said Jesus Christ is the manifestation of God when he comes out of that absolute sense. And then, of course, in the Quran we have that everything returns to God. And this is very clear, that everything وَإِلَيْهِ تُرْجَعُ الْأُمُورِ, and whatever is in this world is going to return to God. And what we find out is that by the fact of sheer honest thinking about these issues, even the greatest living theologian of Anglican Church at this time comes to the conclusion that it cannot be true. There is no meaning of God having a son. And when we say son, it is symbolic. Of course, he has to say it because it is in their tradition. He cannot deny it, otherwise he's not a Christian anymore. But he explains it in a way that it would somehow comes to something like what we say about the creation, about our A'imma being the manifestation of Asma and Sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He exactly was saying the same thing, that Jesus Christ was manifestation of Asma and Sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's why we call him Son of God. Well, of course, this is a very bad language to be used. I mean, why do you call him Son of God? This is silly. And you just call him the manifestation of all Asma and Sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's very acceptable, and we accept it as well. This is very good. Therefore, there is a return of Christianity towards that monotheism, because they are finding it more and more difficult to understand and to explain.
Do you want to get something? Just one question if you have any.
I have another question which I will need to think.
That is later. That is later if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
You mentioned about the Umar Khattab that he explicitly mentioned that this is made halal by Prophet, but I make it haram. And he derives it authority, extends its authority from the political arena to the Sharia. Is this thing something which is continuing in this Sunni school of thought now, or this is something which is one-off and it has stopped?
No, I think it was one-off and it stopped. Even none of other caliphs actually practiced such an authority. It was only the second caliph who practiced this authority, and it was stopped completely afterwards.
If that is the case, then what is the argument that they give to follow that? On what basis they say that this is something which we can follow from the second caliph if it is stopped? If it is right, then it can continue, but if it has stopped, then what is the reasoning or the explanations given for all that sort of things?
Well, I'm not sure, but what probably they would say is that he had that authority. Since he saw that authority for himself, he had that authority to do it. And since no one else did it, probably they didn't see the authority for themselves, or need did not arise. And if need actually had come, of course this could be only said about the Khulafa al-Rashidun, the four caliphs, the four rightly guided caliphs as they call them. Of course, there were not four rightly guided caliphs at the beginning, it was three. Ali ibn Abi Talib was added later on due to the efforts of some Sunni scholars, especially after Shafi'i and some other scholars. He was added later on to the rightly guided caliphs. Otherwise, he was not seen as a rightly guided caliph. There was only three. However, if they see such an authority, they only see it for those rightly guided caliphs, not for anyone else.
Sister, do you have any question?
My question actually is about something we discussed last week and was touched upon in today's session as well. And that is to do with the conjecture and how jurists arrive at their verdicts. If you remember, in the last lesson, we were talking about whether we are allowed to have a Christmas tree, because this thing is actually bothering me. That I need some clarification, please.
Now the Christmas has gone. We can discuss it next year, inshallah. Yeah.
We said that it's okay to have the tree because in Iran the Nowruz celebrations were still continued even now, even though it was a pagan festival, and things to do with it like growing green things and having them in the house and so on and so forth. Therefore, bringing the tree in was also acceptable because it doesn't matter now anymore because it's empty of its connotations, so to speak. But what I'm now thinking is, if there are two types of conjectures, a valid conjecture and an invalid conjecture, what category would this sort of analogy fall under, whereby we or any jurist can say now, I don't know whether any jurists have been consulted in this regard, which I feel they should be, and if they were to be consulted, what verdict would be given?
Well, of course, when we say about conjectures and issuing a fatwa, it means in religious issues. There are some issues which are not religious at all. It's just a personal matter or a social matter in life, which doesn't fall under any religious injunction or category. Say, for example, we are allowed to eat whatever is not haram, okay? and we are told which foods or which drinks are haram, and apart from that you are allowed to eat whatever they eat. Now, for example, if you want to have a British breakfast, which is made out of halal food or halal meat, okay? Now, do you ever go and ask a jurist, am I allowed to have British breakfast because it's British and it's from kuffar, and of course they have been doing it all the time? But you never go and ask. Why? Because you never feel that this falls into a religious category. This is a private thing which we know that generally it's allowed. Now, in such issues as having Christmas tree or not, well, some people might feel that this falls under a religious injunction, and then of course they have the duty to go and ask. But some others, they feel that it really is not related to any religious issue. It's a social or it's a cultural matter that you might like to have a Christmas tree free of all those connotations, as you said, or you might feel that no, this would bring the Christian culture to my house, I don't want it, and I forbid it for my own family, okay? But you don't say anything, you don't pass judgments about others. Now, if someone feels that this doesn't fall in a religious category at all, so they naturally wouldn't go and ask, and they are free to do whatever they want. If someone feels that it falls, now you are, I think, very concerned about the religious connotations of this. Now, I think it is your duty to put our mujtahidun in trouble and write them a question and ask them whether it's allowed to have Christmas tree or not. And the answer would probably be, because there's nothing like this in our riwayat, so that they go and find it, there's nothing like that. The answer would probably be that if this is spreading the culture of kufr, it is haram. If it is not, it is allowed. Well, at the very general type of standard that they always use. So if one feels it might come a day when using a Christmas tree for every Muslim might be haram, because it might be spreading a culture which would somehow affect the Islamic culture. But at some times it might not at all. It might just be a cultural, social issue. Now, in Iran, of course, the Nowruz has really become a cultural, social type of ethos, which is completely free of all those pagan connotations. And even the ulama in Iran, they feel that there is really no need for even issuing a fatwa or answering a question about it, because there's no question that this is something which falls into the category of mubah. People, if they want to do it, they do it. If they don't, they wouldn't do it. So I think a similar situation would come about this Christmas tree and other type of cultural ethos.
If the argument comes straight down to spreading the culture of kuffar, then I think a Christmas tree is the last thing we need to worry about. The television is exponentially far greater in doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are lots of more dangerous things that we are using just without any. Now I tell you something very interesting, and that's about using a tie. You know, in Iran, it is really regarded as spreading the culture of Western people. And you know, we don't wear ties in Iran after the revolution. And you know that someone was so curious to put the question to Ayatollah Khamenei and made trouble for everyone. Because then Ayatollah Khamenei said, no, it is not allowed because it's spreading the culture of kuffar. And then, I don't know what happened, because there are many Muslims around the world who use the tie, and if they want really to, I mean, sometimes putting such questions to ulama is not very good. Because even in the Quran, even we are told that not put many questions to the prophets. You see, we have in the Quran the very clear verse, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la tas'alu an ashya'a in tubda lakum tasu'ukum. O you who believe, do not ask questions which you know if answer comes in a way it would put you in trouble. Do not ask it. Well, just you don't feel that it's related to religion, go and do it. Do not ask about it, because and then the Quran says Because when revelation is coming down and you ask these questions, وَإِن تَسْأَلُوا عَنْهَا حِينَ تُنَزَّلُ الْقُرْآنِ, if Quran is coming down and you go and ask the question, Allah would reveal the answer and it would disturb you. So do not ask. Since Allah has not initiated to tell you anything, just go and take the rukhsa, take the free and ease of doing them. So why should we put ourselves in trouble?
Before I allow Dr. Nizar to do something else, something has been bothering me since the beginning of this lecture or during the lecture is that discussing about the worship, you said that we have to be careful that when we follow somebody, it doesn't become a worship, then we are worshipping that somebody. But what I've understood is that when we are following the Prophet, that worship is allowed. Is that?
No, if the person has authority from God, then we are, of course, worshipping God. If a person speaks and gives any injunctions, if God says, I have given authority to this person, then of course we are worshipping God. And this is the meaning of Ati'ullah wa Ati'ur Rasul, follow the Prophet. And it means that Prophet is talking on our behalf, and therefore when you follow the Prophet, you are worshipping me.
Thank you, Nizar.
I did ask Muhammad Raza's permission that is unrelated to today's topic, because all that you said was very clear. But I thought I would take this opportunity of asking you that if you were an imam at a mosque in Indonesia today, what would you say in your khutbah of Friday about the disaster? How would you actually tell people, the people sitting there who have lost everything, how do you actually try to console them?
Yeah, it's interesting because today I was listening to the news and it said that Rowan Williams, the Archbishop of Canterbury, was saying that what has happened really challenges the faith of the faithful, and probably you are addressing the same issue, that the faith is shaken, as Rowan Williams put it, by this incident. It is very difficult to explain this for ordinary people, but especially those who are affected, because they are in a very bad emotional situation. And the first person whom they can blame is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why did you bring this to us? Now, if many bounties and favors come from the nature, they don't say this is from God. They say this is from the nature. Of course, nature is giving us, and we are reaping the achievements of our hands, and this is it. And when calamity comes, they don't ascribe it, they don't attribute it to nature, they attribute it to God. And of course, this is how we should behave really as very spoiled creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we only want kindness from Him and nothing else. Now, of course, the Quran clearly mentions that the natural disasters are accumulation of some sort of sin which is done on the earth, and it might be somehow unrelated to some people, but these are the forces of this world working as on a system of balanced justice. Ma asaba min musibatin illa bi idhnillah. Of course, it is with the permission of God, but we have ma asabakum min musibatin, whatever calamity falls on you, fabima kasabat aydikum, it's because of what you have done. Wa ya'fu an kathir, and of course Allah forgives many things and He stops these repercussions to come. But when it is accumulated, then repercussions come, and then when it comes, it doesn't ask whether you are innocent or you are guilty. It comes in a massive scale, and it, so to speak, they say it burns dry and wet all together. And of course, if we want to analyze it logically, now in an emotional situation it's not possible, but say 150,000 people died in this occasion. How many people die naturally every day? I don't know, anyone has the count of it? How many people die naturally every day?
I think they say one every minute. A person is born every minute or whatever.
One every minute.
Something like that.
No, I think it's much more than that. No.
There's so many people born every minute, so I'm sure similar people die every minute.
So 3 people every minute.
Something, but there is a figure.
No, I think it's a matter of thousands of people dying every day. Tens of thousands of people dying every day. Now, if you put all these people who die in different places of the world together in a mortuary or in a hospital, you say, wow, how many people are killed by Allah every day? And these people, say for example, 50,000, 60,000 people die every day or a similar figure. And if they all die at one place with a disaster, then you would be surprised why this happens. Why we know that, naturally people are going to die, and we do not recognize it because we don't see it all together at one place. Now we see all of them at one place, and we see somehow the closeness of death and the reality of death before our own eyes. So it is something quite natural. People should die, and they die. Now, if they all die at one place at one time, we become surprised. And secondly, of course, the calamities are something which is the fruit of what we have somehow sown ourselves. And of course, there is one very, very important verse in Surah Taghabun with this regard, which is, of course, which should be taken more personal rather than social, but it applies to social calamities as well. And that is the verse which says, "Ma asaba min musibatin illa bi'idhnillah." No calamity would afflict without Allah's leave and permission. However, whoever has faith, وَمَنْ يُؤْمِنْ بِاللَّهِ يَهْدَ قَلْبَهُ. Whoever has faith, Allah would guide their hearts. It means that usually guidance comes amidst difficulty and hardship. Usually, you see, people are very ignorant all the time. And the Quran says we usually send calamities for people to come to their minds, to start to think again, to rethink. You see, if 100,000 people die, and that brings 1 billion people to their minds that what are we doing? Why are we just going ignorant? If it brings, of course, you see, Allah sends the Prophet as a token of His mercy, and no one believes in them. Like Nuh, for example. He sent Nuh after 900 years, only 80 people believed in him. Now, we might ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why did you send Nuh? For 80 people, it did not really worth it. It was very costly. Nuh living for 2,000 years in this world, really in trouble, and all these verses of the Quran we recite about the Nuh and all these things, all these things, only for 80 people. What was it wasn't cost effective, you might say. Why did you send such a grand prophet, Ulul Azm, and no one believed in it? But he does it as a matter of course. Now, the calamities as well come as a matter of course, to bring people to their minds. Now, you might say, no one come to their minds. What's the use of it? But this is done as a token of actually mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to bring some others. People who have to die, they will die in one way or another. However, these come as a token of mercy to bring other peoples to their minds. Now, if they don't come to their minds, of course, there's something wrong with them, not something wrong with the action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Any sister want to take up on this point? It's become very interesting. Any sister? No? Yeah, brother, on this point? Okay, last question.
Alaykum salam.
You mentioned about the ulama giving fatwas based on Quran, in the sense that we cannot consider to be ilm, it has to be considered to be done. You also mentioned about qiyas. But obviously at the time of the Imam there was no such thing as dhan, because for them any knowledge we got from them should have been considered to be ilm. Or would you consider the knowledge of Imam Imams as deriving from the laws of Allah as also dhan. If there was no problem of dhan at the time of the Imams, on what basis would the ulama consider dhan as an acceptable form of source, or well, not source of knowledge, but a way of deriving knowledge?
Yeah, it's a very good question actually, and you would not believe how much discussion has gone about this in the history of our usulis and akhbaris, that whether we could actually act according to dhan or we could not, and whether there is an ilm or not. Now, first of all, of course, A'imma did not need conjecture. They had knowledge. They had inherited the knowledge of the Prophet, peace be on him. But still, at their time, people acted according to conjecture because they didn't have access to A'imma alayhi salam at all times. And even when they went and asked the question from A'imma, they understood it in a way that it might not have been a correct way. So A'imma actually referred people to different ulama in different cities to go and ask them. And certainly they used their conjecture. They used the ahadith, they understood something from it. And even our understanding from the Quran and hadith is not sheer knowledge. It is dhan still, because we have different interpretations of a hadith or of the Quran. So at that time it was used. Now, we had some akhbaris who they said dhan is not a valid procedure for finding the ahkam of Sharia, and we only have to refer to riwayat, which is ilm, which is knowledge, which of course was not a valid argument, because we know riwayat, in the riwayat we have fabricated riwayat, we have true riwayat, how we understand them, we have contradictions, and all these things that would make you to go and find out, make effort, and that is to make a conjecture, of course, at the end, that this is to the best of my knowledge and to the best of my effort, this is the case. Now, there is a very, very big chapter in one of the greatest books of Sheikh Murtaza al-Ansari on usul al-fiqh, jurisprudence, about whether we could use conjecture or not. There were some ulama, they said we have no knowledge, our way to knowledge of Sharia is blocked because we don't have access to A'imma alayhi salam, and they said we can use any conjecture at this time. Now, Sheikh Murtaza al-Ansari was trying to differentiate between two types of conjectures in finding the ahkam of Sharia. One is a valid conjecture and the other is an invalid conjecture. Then, of course, it's a very, very long argument, long chapters in books of usul if you go and study. But at the end he said the valid conjecture is the conjecture which is authorized by A'imma themselves. An invalid conjecture is any conjecture which is not authorized by A'imma, including qiyas. He says qiyas, of course, we see it is a conjecture. It seems valid and valuable. However, it is not authorized by A'imma alayhi salam, so we cannot use this conjecture. Then he differentiates between dhan and dhanni. And he says that dhanni is a valid conjecture and dhan is an invalid conjecture, any type of conjecture. And sometimes he's calling it ilmi, something which is related to knowledge of A'imma alayhi salam. Now, for example, khabar al-wahid is something which we use in finding the ahkam, and it is based on our conjecture that to the best of our knowledge this might have come from A'imma because there is a valid chain for it, but it's khabar al-wahid. There might be a mistake there. We allow it, but we use it. But do we have authority to use it? Because the Quran is very categorical that you either have to use knowledge, فَمَاذَا بَعْدَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا الضَّلَالِ. Either you have knowledge or you don't have knowledge. And if you don't have knowledge, don't talk at all. It's only knowledge which is valid. Then he says, okay, A'imma had this knowledge. They authorized some sort of conjecture, especially khabar al-wahid. They said that if something comes from us, from trustable people, if it is not against the Quran, if it's not against the major principles of Islam, then you accept it. And in fact, this type of conjecture has been made valid by Ayyimah alayhimus salam. So it is something which is authorized again by knowledge, by Ayyimah alayhimus salam, that we use. So it's allowed.
Okay, thank Sheikh Muhammad wa
Allahumma salli.